Okay, so I think we've kind of reached the point in the class now where we can sort of tie a bow on the theory and start making a transition to the applied ethics portion. So in order to do that, I thought it might behoove us to kind of briefly recap where we've been, the major ethical theories we've talked about, and leave you with a few examples to kind of think through in the discussion board how we think each of the theories would go about answering the questions that are raised in the text that I'm going to read here in a few minutes. So I thought I might start by going back to the chart that I introduced forever ago and sort of intermittently hit and miss kind of referenced and filled in for you. So here it is. Well, it's really close. Sorry. It's a little better. So remember we have, is it reasons or feelings that should determine that which is ethical? We're looking at the results or the intentions. Is it society that decides or something meta-societal? And is it the person or the entirety, or is it the entirety of the person or particular acts which count? So the first column here then is nihilism, which says, forget ethics, it's stupid. So put an X in all of those boxes. Okay. The next column then is the ethical ramifications of that decision, to put X's in all of the boxes. Which is to say, let's look at the successful winners and how they would determine what to do. Notice it wouldn't necessarily be with regards to ethics, but it may be with regards to how to treat others or themselves or their craft. So it's going to be feelings based. We talked about that. It's going to be based on the results, either they're successful or unsuccessful. Meta-societal because we're looking at greatness and legacy leaving. And particular people, right? The whole person being whether either winners or losers. They move to the next column here, cultural relativism, where it's question marks throughout, except for who decides. Who decides? Society, right? That's the culture. So each particular society or each particular culture is going to decide for themselves whether it's reason or feeling, results or intention, so on and so forth. Then we move to individual relativism, which is the same, question marks all the way down, except society or meta-societal will be determined by something meta-societal, namely the individual. And we talked about that with regards to the line cutting and so forth. Then we move over really to the four major ethical theories that we discussed. And really kind of the lenses through which I want you to look at the examples I'm going to leave you with in this video. So we look first at virtue ethics, it's VE there at the top. It's going to be reason-based, right? We talked about that, the tripartite soul, and happiness is a decision, it's an intellectual thing, it's a mental thing, not a physical thing. It's going to be based on the results, because remember, the main thing, the bumper sticker, if you will, for virtue ethics is, what type of person am I? Or what type of person do others view me as? What is my character? Remember, as determined by everyone else, which is why it's societal. And if it's societal, it has to be results, because society does not have access to our intentions. And of course, we're looking at the entirety of the person. Good guy or jerk at the end, right? Holistically speaking. Then we move on to care ethics, which is our example of a feelings-based ethics. And remember, these are the benevolent feelings that we're paying attention to, the natural ones of connection and so forth. And then we have question marks in the next two, but they're different types of question marks than they were for the relativisms, right? Is it results or intentions? We talked about the 5 love languages and tough love and so on and so forth with regards to that distinction and the blurriness that could be that distinction for care ethics. Because remember, care ethics is still developing in a way that most of the rest of these have developed. Sure, there's going to be some minor tweaks involved, but care ethics is still going through some major transformations in some ways. Then is it society or meta-societal? That's going to depend again on whether it's results or intentions. If it's results, it's going to be determined by others, which to some extent means society. If it's intentions, then it's going to be determined by the person making the intention. So it's going to be meta-societal, right? Well, I intended to show love versus the person actually received it as love. And we're talking about particular actions here, actions of care and concern and love, and so on and so forth. Then we move to the D, deontology. Again, reason-based. I talked about how you're supposed to take that kind of director point of view, step back, and look at it more universally, and imagining worlds and so forth. That's reason-based. It's the intentions. Remember, the only intention that counts is because it is your duty to do so. It's meta-societal. Reason itself is going to dictate. Right? So here Berner and Rayleigh talk about each individual determines. That's not exactly accurate from Kant's perspective. The deontology is really about reason itself. That's what's universal amongst us all, this capacity to reason. And as particular acts, they're going to be plugged into that scientific formula for ethics, the categorical imperative test. And finally, utilitarianism. Again, reason-based, because we're doing math. We're doing a greater than, less than, ratios, cost-benefit analysis, return on investment, and so forth. It's going to be about results, right? The consequences. Did it actually result in a greater amount of happiness for a greater number of folks? Did it actually result in more overall benefit than cost? So on and so forth. Society is going to be who determines that. It's going to be particular actions that you're going to be comparing and contrasting with other particular actions, right? So, virtue ethics, what type of character is this demonstrating? What type of character are people going to see, care? Am I loving others? Do they recognize it as love? Deontology, what's my duty? What if everyone else did this too? And utilitarianism, does it actually result in a greater amount of happiness for a greater number of folks? Okay. So now I want to read part of a couple of kids' books. I don't want to finish it. I want to leave you with the cliffhanger. I want to leave you with the ethical dilemma. And then the next video, then for the next time, for, I guess, Wednesday would be, then I'll finish the book and ask you then, okay, now that we saw how it turned out, did that change anything with regards to the ethics of the situation? If it did, then clearly you are in the camp of results are what matter more with regards to ethics than the intentions. If not, then perhaps it's more intentions-based. Because remember, I'm also laying the groundwork here for you to not only be thinking through the theories that we've talked about, but also begin to articulate and begin to formulate how it is that you make decisions with regards to ethics. So that's going to be the third exam, is you're going to have to articulate your ethical theory and how you go about implementing it and so forth. Okay? So I'm going to start with Charlie and Lola. But I've used all my pocket change. What you do in class today, son? Well, you know, I watched my teacher read me a kid's book. Aren't you in college? Yep. I have this little sister, Lola. She is small and very funny. Today, Lola is really excited because Granny and Grandpa are taking us both to the zoo. I can't wait to see the seals, Charlie. Bark, bark. When we are getting ready, Lola says, "What are you going to buy from the zoo shop, Charlie?" "I'm getting a completely good seal toy for the bath, just like Lotta's." And I say, "I'd really like one of those books that shows where all the animals come from." Then I say, "Lola, you can't eat your tangerine now. Mom packed it for lunch. You're not very good at saving things for later." "Yes, I am, Charlie." And I say, "You are not." When you read a book, you never wait for the end. You always skip ahead. Oh no, I know what happens. In a bath time, you always finish all the bubbles. Oh no, it's all empty. In the car on the way to the zoo, I say, "Maybe you shouldn't eat your sandwich now, Lola. You should save it for later." But Lola just says, "Charlie, what's this box?" "It's a camera. Dad bought some for us so we can take pictures of all the animals at the zoo." "Oh, look at that, Charlie. Click, click, click." I say, "Lola, the camera's not just for clicking. It's for taking photographs." And Lola says, "Oh, okay, Charlie." So we have to presume that this is an actual camera with film and so forth that you advance. You can't go through digitally and delete them ahead of time, or anything along those lines. Like this is an old-fashioned camera. So, sorry for the aside. Okay. That matters for the story. That's why I mention it. Granny and Grandpa stop at the park so Lola and I can feed the ducks. I break off little pieces of bread, but Lola throws all of hers straight into the pond. Lola says, "I've run out of bread, Charlie. Please may I have some of yours?" I say, "All right, Lola." When we get to the zoo, Granny and Grandpa say we can look at any animal we want. I say, "Lola, look at the giraffes." "Ooh, they're especially good," says Lola. "But my clicky camera is completely filled up, Charlie. Please, can I borrow yours?" And I say, "Okay, Lola, but just take one photo, because I really want to photograph the anteaters and the armadillos." Click, click, click. Then Lola says, "I'm going to ask Granny if I can buy a zoo balloon." And I say, "Don't you think you should save your pocket money if you want to buy your seal toy at the zoo shop later?" "But I've got lots of money, Charlie," says Lola. At lunchtime, Lola says, "Charlie, please can I have some of your sandwich?" "But Lola, you've already had yours." "Please, Charlie?" I say, "You can have a little bit." Lola says, "I'm going to buy some pink milk because I really am extremely thirsty." I say, "Lola, you won't have anything left to spend in the zoo shop." "Oh, yes, I will, Charlie. I still have one more bit of money." When we get to the seal tank, Lola says, "Oh, bark, bark, can I please borrow your camera, Charlie? I absolutely must take a photograph of the seals." "Yes," I say, "but you can only take one photo because I'm saving them for the armadillos." Click, click, click. "Lola!" "Oops, sorry, Charlie. I used it up by accident." At the zoo shop, Lola says, "Now I must go and find my seal toy." And I say, "Look, Lola, this is the complete animal atlas. It has all the animals and where they come from. There's an elephant, an armadillo, and a bald eagle." But Lola isn't listening. Instead, she says, "The man said I didn't have enough money for my seal toy." I say, "That's because you spent your pocket money on all those other things." Lola says, "But what will I do now, Charlie? Now I won't have a toy like Lotta's." So I say, "Here you are, Lola. You can have some of my money." And Lola says, "Oh, thank you ever so much, Charlie." On the way home, Lola says, "Are there any seals in your animal book, Charlie?" And I say, "I didn't buy the book because I didn't have enough money." Lola says, "I thought you had lots of money because you saved it up." "No, Lola," I say. "I didn't have enough money for my book after I gave you the money for the seal toy." So the question that I want you to think about from the perspective of the four major ethical theories we talked about: virtue ethics, care ethics, deontology, utilitarianism. Was Charlie ethical? It may matter how much Charlie and Lola are. Possibly, possibly not. Lola, I think, is about 5, 6, 7, somewhere in that range. Charlie's more in the 10, 11, maybe 12, but probably 10 or 11 range. Okay. And as you're thinking about it, I want you to think about it from those perspectives, from those four major ethical theories, but also from yours as well. You don't have to articulate yours necessarily in the discussion board, but I want you to kind of begin thinking, what do I think about Charlie's actions here? And I wonder if what you think about his actions may have something to do with your own birth order, as to whether you're the oldest, youngest, middle, so on and so forth. It's a shame we can't actually be in class to discuss this, because there's a lot going on here. I know it's a kid's book, and Dr. Travis is probably reading a lot into it, but there's a lot going on here. A lot of implicit things that I hope you can think about. Like, I want you to take some time to think about what's really going on here. And think about it deeply from each of these ethical theories' perspectives, because I hope then that by having an example or two or three, you can really start to see how sometimes these theories will align with one another. They will all agree, but for very different reasons. Other times they will completely disagree because they're all taking different things into consideration. They all have different endpoints for their theory. They all have different main foci for their theories. Right? So again, that's one of the reasons I think the chart can sometimes be helpful. You can kind of see quickly at a glance and compare and contrast. Wow, these theories disagree greatly. I wonder why. Oh, because this is here and this is here. I can see why the differences in the columns leads to the difference in what the answer is. Next one, still a kid's book. But again, far deeper than it may seem on the surface. Or this one even might be on the surface, pretty obviously, pretty deep. Frederick. All along the meadow, where the cows grazed and the horses ran, there was an old stone wall. In that wall, not far from the barn and the granary, the chatty family of field mice had their home. But the farmers had moved away, the barn was abandoned, and the granary stood empty. And since winter was not far off, the little mice began to gather corn and nuts and wheat and straw. They all worked day and night, all except Frederick. Frederick, why don't you work? They asked. Well, I do work, said Frederick. I gather sun rays for the cold, dark winter days. And when they saw Frederick sitting there staring at the meadow, they said, And now, Frederick? I gather colors, answered Frederick simply, for winter is gray. And once, Frederick seemed half asleep. Are you dreaming, Frederick? They asked reproachfully. But Frederick said, Oh, no, I'm gathering words, for the winter days are long and many, and we'll run out of things to say. The winter days came, and when the first snow fell, the 5 little field mice took to their hideout in the stones. Now, I don't think I'm reading too much into this one. We may have a supply problem. We have 5 mice going into this wall who want to eat. We only have 4 mice who gathered food. What if there's not enough food to feed 5 mice because only 4 gathered? The ethical question becomes, should Frederick get food? And again, this is deep. Like, I want you to dig into the theories that we've talked about and analyze it from through each lens. Right? Last example for this time, and I may do more examples for next time as well as finishing the stories. I left you with cliffhangers on purpose. I got to finish the stories to give you resolution, right? I may also have some additional examples next time as well. We'll see how it goes. But I want these to turn into, as much as possible, real discussions, right? So one person may claim on the discussion board, well, Aristotle would say to do this based on these reasons. And someone else may chime in and be like, maybe, but what about these things to consider? Right? Like, I want kind of a back and forth as much as possible so that all of us together can be working to really clarify these ethical theories. And what they would actually say to do in real situations. Last example is not a book. An ethics teacher at a 2-year community college has several students in it. Sorry, it's not an ethics teacher. It's an English teacher. An English teacher in a 2-year community college has several students in his composition course whose ignorance of the English language has proved invincible. He has given them extra work and extra counseling from the first week of the semester. They have been diligent in their efforts to improve. Though they are in a construction technology program, and will undoubtedly be employed in jobs that require little writing skill, the composition course is a requirement for graduation. In the instructor's estimation, these students would not be able to pass the course legitimately if they took it 3 times, 5 times, who knows how many times. The ethical question then is, should he artificially raise their grades from F's to D's? D's would be passing enough that they would get credit for the course and be able to graduate. You know, once you think about it through the lenses of the 4 major ethical theories we've talked about, virtue ethics, right? So if Aristotle is the professor of this course, what do we think he would do and why? If a care ethicist, Nell Noddings, if she were the professor for this course, what do we think she would do and why? If Kant were the professor, what would he do and why? If John Stuart Mill or Peter Singer were the professor for this course, what do we think they would do and why? Those are what I want discussed. But in the back of your mind also, we want you to be thinking about what you would do if you were the professor and why. See you next time.